We're talking about data privacy today, or how Potter lost his invisibility. So first of all, right, we collect a lot of data. You guys all know this. We're collecting something like 150 gigabytes of data per person per day, right? So much data is being surveilled on you, on your actions, on the things that you do, the places that you go, the actions that you take, right? Every little piece of you is being scrutinized. Why? Because it's really useful to be able to understand how the system works, understand how a user interacts with the system, get a deep dive of, let's say, a problem that you might have that's really flaky, or a bird's eye view of how people are using your application just in general. So on a large scale, monitoring, observability, these are big concepts that are so important, right? They're so important as a company to understand how a user is interacting with the product. But that means so much data, right? The amount of data being collected on you is on everything. You know, every little piece of that system, every little piece of that component, every button you touch is being calculated, right? And so the question really is, you know, as both a user and a developer, how do you secure that? How do you, defend yourself? How do you defend your users against unwanted access or data leaks, right? Okay, so a couple things that we're going to go through today, the scale of it all we just went through, consequences of handling too much data. We're going to talk about reactive compliance and how those regulations came about, and then what our responsibility is as, again, both users and developers. First of all, for data consequences, where are you generating data, right? Your laptop, your browser, every single device you own, your smartwatches. Even when you're not holding devices, you might be walking through the street and those traffic cameras have video on you, right? Governments have developed technologies that surveil people from high up. They released information about drones that can take very small, high-res images of people from very high up at the resolution of an entire city, right? And this was declassified 10 years ago. Think about what they have now, right? Every little piece of you is being tracked. So, who's heard of Have I Been Pwned? Great. If you haven't, pull out your phone and open this QR code. I'm going to do a little contest and see who has the most data leaks. So this is built by Troy Hunt. He's a Microsoft regional director and a security advocate. He built this website that collects data leaks and then puts your email in them so that you can search it up. So go ahead, fill out put your email in there, and then see how many pop up. The record, I have 7, but I feel like you guys should have more.
I have 6.
6, pretty good. Anyone have more than 2? Raise your hand.
I have 9.
You have 9. Oh my God.
27.
27? What the hell is going on? Can we use your email? That's crazy. Okay. Who's got over 5? Raise your hand. Over 10? Keep your hands up. Over 15? How many do you have? 26. Wow, okay. Right? So all of these are known data leaks that were found on the dark web. Troy Hunt collected these up, put them in a data processing thing, and now you know that your data is leaked and who leaked it. But these are the known data leaks. This doesn't cover all the unknown data leaks. This doesn't cover everywhere else your data is being accessed, right? So subscribe to this thing and be scared, because it is scary. And even if you're being careful, even if you're not, sharing your data anywhere, or you're not using things in, let's say, public areas, you can still be vulnerable. Less than a year ago, this company called Leung had a configuration change that made it so session tokens were sent to the wrong CDN. And what this actually meant was that for a time of a couple of hours, anyone who logged into Leung was accidentally sent to a different account. You were logged into someone else's account, and someone else was logged into your account, right? This is massive. Your password could be the longest, it could be 64 characters, totally randomized. You could be using everything securely, and yet the website still leaked all your data, right? So you are still vulnerable. OpenAI, we always know, they collect a lot of data on the internet, they crunch that text, they generate things out of it, right? It's great that we have OpenAI, but there's also the concern of, is it okay that we put this, this information on the internet and now they're taking it without consent, right? Same with Clearview AI. Right? Clearview AI is a company that collects all your social media photos, it scrapes them, and then it generates a data set that the police can use to identify. Right? Given a face, the police can use this company to identify you on their social media. Did you guys consent to this? I kind of doubt it. So when everything here is being tracked, how can you really be safe? And even worse is that some of these systems are being put into use in things like courtrooms. So there's a system called Compass, which was created by researchers to decide how likely is it for someone to be criminalized after being sentenced and then returning. Just experimental, wasn't really tested out. They created it, and then a couple of years later, they found out that the judges were using it in US courtrooms. They were using it as a score to decide how long to sentence people. Right? This was untested. This was biased against people of color. This was, wrong in so many ways, and yet, once these systems get out, everyone wants a piece of the data, and everyone wants to say they're data-driven. Everyone wants to say, we've made this decision based on someone else's, objective knowledge. But that's not true, that's not safe, and it's not unbiased. So privacy is having control over a situation. It's about understanding the audience and knowing how far information will flow, trusting the people, the situation, and the context. So I ask you this, can you really trust the people, the situation, and the context? At the end of the day, who owns your data, right? So when we talk about different countries, the EU thinks that you own your data. The person who generated the data owns it. That's great. The US thinks that whoever created the data, the company generally owns the data. At the end of the day, who holds the data? Because it's not you guys. So we're gonna talk about data regulation, but before that, I have a quick quiz. If you guys pass this quiz, we can skip all the data regulation boring parts, all right? So hands up, what does CRUD stand for? Yes.
Create, retrieve, update, delete.
Wrong, that is wrong. It is actually select, insert, update, and delete. I will not be taking questions, thank you. We're gonna be talking about reactive compliance and how these regulations came about. Don't worry, none of this is boring, I promise you. So the one you guys probably all know about, GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, was put in place by the EU in order to enforce rules on how companies should control their data, right? What kind of consent and control that you have over the data that you have generated, right? And that encompasses a bunch of different things, but if you've seen those cookie banners, accept, consent, all these things on websites, that's part of it. Data subject access regulation, that's really important too, that's part of GDPR. That's saying that, I want to know what data you have on me. And that company is legally required to give you back that data, right? Collect it, give it back, and then now you understand what the company is, right? COPPA, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, protects the interactions of children online. HIPAA, Health Insurance Act, in order for you to keep your health data private. And these are great, but why do we have them? Why do we need these laws? Because the company never treated the data well in the first place, right? So all of this is reactive. All of this is because governments and the public realize that people are misusing our data, they're mistreating it, they're over-collecting, and they're not understanding consent. So we come and try and put these rules into place, and we try and have companies adhere to them. But it's so hard. It's so hard when you have so much data. You're collecting it from every little piece, and now suddenly you have to adhere to these regulations. It's very hard to get that all correct, right? And it's very hard to convince a company that you have to get this done, right? You have to start giving data back. You have to add consent. You start adding in, punishments, but it's really difficult to enforce all this. So it really is, I think, our responsibility as developers, as users, as product people, to step up and say, they don't have the incentives. These companies, the leadership doesn't always have the incentive to, collect less data, to be more private with their data, to be more secure with the data. That's not their incentive structure, but for us it's really important, right? So how can we convince them to act against their own self-interests? Did anyone take an oath when they started to become an engineer, a developer, anything like that? No? Too bad, right? But doctors have to take one, engineers have to take one, right? There's a code of ethics that they have to abide by, but we don't have to, we don't have a set code of ethics, right? And I think that's really important to understand, that it is our responsibility. It is something that we have to step up to the plate. So as a user, what can you actually do? Password manager, use a password manager. You can use one single memorized password and then a bunch of randomized passwords using the password manager. Very easy. Please use it. Bitwarden is free. Please guys, very easy. Signal, right? Signal is encrypted. It means that it's end-to-end. It's one of the strongest encryption apps out there. Very secure. HTTPS encryption, whenever you go to a website, make sure that you're using HTTPS. If it's not, your data might not be secure. There's extensions that you can get to make sure that the websites you're on are only HTTPS. VPN, use a VPN to hide your movements or be more secure about what you're doing, where you're using it. Multi-factor authentication, turn it on, make sure that your phone is with you at all times. And then check your data collection settings, right? Because a lot of the time, these companies will decide that it's better to collect all your data, and you can opt out, but only if you really find it, right? So double check those app data collection settings. Make sure that they're only collecting the data that you're okay with them collecting. Right? Be responsible with your data as much as you can, right? Okay, if you're interested in reading more literature about this, look up The Art of Invisibility. It's by Kevin Mitnick, one of the most famous hackers out there. They said that he could whisper into a phone and launch a nuclear bomb. Not true, but very smart guy regardless. Teaches you about how all these systems can track you even when you don't think they are, right? And how to actually be invisible in this crazy surveillance world. And Permanent Record by Edward Snowden, right? Details the findings that he went through, and a lot of different things about how powerful these systems are. As a developer or company, you want to get a CSIO if you can, right? As a startup founder, you want to assign someone in order to decide, we need to audit these systems, we need to be responsible for them. We want to build systems privacy first. You don't want to just build them willy-nilly, have someone break in and go, no, I guess we should, secure the database, we should put a password on it now, right? Build them first, have the privacy standards first, that way you avoid responsibility, you avoid culpability, and losing your users' data, right? Don't roll your own encryption, these are standard things. And audit your systems, go through every piece that you can, once in a while, every half year, every year, double check, make sure that your things are password locked, they're secured, right? You're using authentication correctly. You want to increase privacy accessibility. You want to make it easier for your users to find those privacy settings, to understand what data they're being, what data is being collected, and how can they turn it on or off, right? Compliance, we already talked about this, and then incident response plan. If anything happens, what are you going to do? If 3 a.m. Friday night, you find out that all your data has been leaked, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to lock it down? Minimizing attack surface, I promise we're almost done. Setting standards for retention, deletion. The less data you have, the less you have to worry about, right? So to begin with, you don't want to collect all the data possible. You want to be asking, why is this data important? Why are we taking this data? What business insights are we actually getting out of it, right? And if it's not useful, you need to push back on that, right? We can't be collecting every single little piece and then hoping it works. Because that also means that when the regulations come and you have to start deleting or anonymizing your data, a ton of people depend on that, right? It's not just one or two users, it's all the stakeholders, it's all the product managers, it's all the leadership, it's the entire engineering teams and other engineering teams who rely on that data because you fed it to them and you said it's fine, and suddenly it's not fine anymore. So the earlier that you anonymize your data, you pseudonymize it, you aggregate it, and you get rid of excess data as fast as possible, you follow these standards, and that means you get less trouble later. So at the end of the day, you really don't want that guy to get your data. So, ask for the purpose of your data, collect what is needed, don't collect what isn't needed, and build your system's privacy first. Build it with the user in mind first. And we are all accountable for these systems, right? We are responsible for putting these systems into place. We're both the users and the creators, so we have to be responsible. things that you should read, designing data intensive applications. Please read this, every person should read this. It's a great book, it's the best book for data. Whether or not you work in data, it's great for understanding databases and synchronous and asynchronous work and all that kind of stuff. Very useful, please, read this book. Practical data privacy, instructions on how to keep your data private, and the alignment problem. This is about AI machine learning and why the data we've collected doesn't necessarily solve the problems that we think it does. Very amazing book, I think you guys should probably read it. And so in summary, we collect so much data that we have to be responsible for it. We have to be proactive, not reactive, when we're collecting this data and anonymizing it and protecting both ourselves and our users from it. And that's a responsibility all of us have to take. So a quick quote, tech people rarely, if ever, have a sense of the broader applications and policy implications of the projects to which they're assigned. And the work that consumes them tends to require such specialized knowledge that to bring it up at a barbecue will get them disinvited from the next one, because no one cared. In retrospect, maybe that's what got us here. Questions?